This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Podcast, the Becker Business Minute Podcast. And this is a story about Vice Media and new media. New media. So what many people don't understand about new media is how the growth engine works and how it grows leadership, exposure, distribution, and so forth. So in the old days, a newspaper would print its newspapers, it would distribute the newspapers, and it would get readers based on how many people read that newspaper. As those brands evolved into digital brands, they would really still do it the old-fashioned way. People would read their newsletters, they'd read their email newsletters, they would go to their website, and they'd build traction in the real way of people reading their newsletters, reading their websites, and finding their websites through search engines. That's sort of old media converted into new media. Now, in the last 10 years, there's this development of new media that's really new media. And new media that's really new media hasn't had a traditional long-term following. Rather than get traditional long-term following, what they essentially do is they start their media brand and they sort of buy distribution through all sorts of other websites. So if you're on Yahoo and you see another media brand on there, or if you're on a different site and see another media brand on there, that typically means that whoever that media brand is, and I don't know if Axios does this, I don't know if Business Insider does this, but generally those companies can grow their platform so much quicker by buying lots of distribution on other sites. And this is essentially how Vice Media grew from a very small media company into a huge media company in a short period of time. It grew to $700 million in revenues, a valuation of $5.7 billion, because what it really did was bought distribution in all kinds of other ways. And so the example there is they're paying all kinds of distribution and other media firms to get their content out to the world, and they're trying to arbitrage that with advertisers and sales and so forth. That means the sponsor pays them for a certain amount of views of Vice Media content, and Vice Media content is essentially buying distribution through others, and they're trying to arbitrage the difference between what the advertiser pays them and what they're paying others. Now, this works until it doesn't work. When they owe a lot of people for distribution, but their advertiser will no longer pay them a delta, they go in the wrong direction. And this is essentially how Vice Media went from a $5.7 billion valuation now down to less than a $1.5 billion valuation. They tried to sell the firm last year at $1.5 billion. It didn't go through. But the real thing is it's sort of new media turned upside down, the new media gone wrong. So they're paying too much for distribution, their advertisers aren't paying them enough, and suddenly growth is no longer there, and they're trying to retrench to be profitable again. But you can only be profitable again. You can't get profitable again by cutting enough headcounts. You got to cut what you're paying for distribution, but you still got to arbitrage what your advertisers are paying you versus the distribution that's out there. I think it's a fascinating lesson in sort of how the new media business works versus truly building a platform of readers, listeners, audience, and so forth, where you're not paying so much for distribution. In any event, a fascinating story in new media going wrong, watching this Vice Media situation. Thank you for listening to the Becker Business Minute Podcast, the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Thank you very, very much.